The emergency beacon had been silent for 3 days when Captain H finally decided to investigate. The patrol cruiser drifted through the asteroid field of the 442 system, its sensors picking up the faint distress signal that had been broadcasting on an ancient frequency, one that hadn't been used by any civilized species in over 2 centuries. "Captain, the signal is definitely coming from that cluster," reported Lieutenant L, his 4 arms dancing across the navigation console. "But our scans show no ship signatures, no life signs, nothing that should be generating a beacon." H's chitinous plates shifted with unease. They had been patrolling this sector for decades, keeping the trade routes safe from pirates and scavengers. They knew every rock, every derelict, every piece of space junk that drifted through these lanes. Something new didn't just appear. "Take us closer," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived the border wars. "But keep shields up and weapons ready. I don't like mysteries." As they approached the asteroid cluster, their sensors began picking up more details. Hidden among the floating rocks was indeed a ship, or what remained of one. It was unlike anything in their databases. The hull was a dull gray metal and pitted by micrometeorites and radiation. The design was crude by modern standards, with visible weld lines and what appeared to be mechanical joints rather than the seamless biometal construction that most civilized species had adopted ago. "Captain," whispered Communications Officer N, her voice trembling with something between awe and fear. "That ship! The design matches descriptions from the archive wars. The patterns, the construction method. I think that's a human vessel." The bridge fell silent. Every member of the crew knew the legends. Humans, the mythical species that had supposedly challenged the Galactic Council 200 years ago before vanishing without a trace. Most scholars believed they were just stories, cautionary tales about what happened to species that refused to submit to galactic law. "That's impossible," H said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Humans are extinct. The Council made sure of that after they violated the non-interference protocols." "The beacon is coming from inside that ship," L reported. "And Captain, there are life signs, faint but definitely there." H stared at where the ancient human vessel hung motionless against the stars. The smart thing to do would be to report this to High Command, let the Council decide what to do with this impossible discovery. But something in the weak, desperate pulse of that distress beacon made her think of her own cubs, safe in their nursery pods back on Prime. "Prepare a boarding party," she ordered. "Full environmental suits. We don't know what condition that ship is in." An hour later, H found herself floating through the airlocks of the human vessel, accompanied by her security chief and medical officer. The ship's artificial gravity was offline, and their helmet lights cut through the darkness to reveal corridors that seemed impossibly narrow by galactic standards. Everything was built for smaller beings, more compact than the various species that made up the Galactic Council. The distress beacon led them deeper into the ship, past what appeared to be living quarters with furniture that looked almost quaint in its simplicity. There were no bio-neural interfaces, no quantum-entangled control systems, just buttons, switches, and displays that seemed to rely on basic electromagnetic principles. "By the 7 moons," breathed Dr. N, the ship's medical officer. "This technology is so primitive it's almost elegant. Look at these interfaces. They're designed for beings with only 2 manipulator appendages." They found the source of the beacon in what appeared to be the ship's medical bay. Inside a crude but functional stasis pod lay a creature that matched every description from the archive files. It was smaller than most Council species, with pale skin, bilateral symmetry, and the distinctive 5-digit manipulators that had supposedly given humans their legendary tool-making abilities. "Is it alive?" H asked. Dr. N ran his scanner over the pod. "Barely. The stasis system is failing. It's running on emergency power and has been for some time. Life signs are weak but stable. Captain, if this really is a human, we're looking at the last member of an extinct species." H studied the peaceful face visible through the pod's transparent aluminum cover. The being looked young, though she had no idea how to judge human age. There was something vulnerable about it that stirred unexpected protective instincts. "Can we move the pod to our ship?" "I believe so, but Captain," Dr. N's voice carried a warning tone, "if this becomes known, the implications could be enormous. The Council has standing orders regarding human artifacts. They're to be destroyed on sight." "Then we don't tell the Council," H said firmly. "Not yet. This being is dying and I won't let that happen on my watch. We save its life first, ask questions later. The transfer took careful coordination, but within hours they had the human stasis pod safely installed in Smedical Bay. Dr. N worked frantically to understand the alien technology, jury-rigging their own power systems to support the failing pod. The stasis field is destabilizing, he reported. If we're going to save this being, we need to wake it up now on our ship under our care. But Captain, we have no idea how a human will react to finding itself surrounded by aliens. H thought about the stories from the archive wars. Humans were supposed to be violent, unpredictable, capable of incredible destruction when threatened. But looking at the small, frail form in the stasis pod, she found it hard to believe this being could threaten anyone. Do it, she ordered. Begin revival procedures and have security standing by just in case. The revival process took 3 hours. During that time, H found herself packing the corridors of her ship, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her career. She had rescued refugee populations before, survivors of pirate raids and natural disasters. But this was different. This was a human, a member of the species that had supposedly been so dangerous the entire Galactic Council had united to eliminate them. When Dr. N finally called her to the medical bay, she found the human awake and sitting up in the bed they had provided. It was definitely male, according to the medical scans, and appeared to be young adult by human standards. His eyes, a startling blue color that was common in no other known species, tracked their movements with obvious intelligence. Captain, Dr. N reported quietly, he's been conscious for about 10 minutes. He hasn't tried to attack anyone or shown any signs of aggression. In fact, he seems more frightened than dangerous. The human's mouth moved, producing sounds that their universal translators struggled to parse. The language was unlike anything in their databases, but gradually, patterns began to emerge. Thank you, the human said slowly, his voice hoarse from the stasis sleep. I thought I was going to die out there. H stepped forward cautiously. You are safe, she said, hoping the translator was working properly. You are aboard the ship. I am Captain H. What is your name? The human's eyes widened, and for a moment she thought he might panic. Then his face broke into what she realized must be a smile, a facial expression unique to humans that her cultural database said indicated friendliness or gratitude. He said, I'm a human, are you? H confirmed. You were found in a damaged ship in the asteroid field. Your stasis pod was failing. My medical officer says you would have died within hours if we hadn't found you. Nodded slowly, and she was surprised to see moisture gathering in his eyes. Thank you, he repeated. I've been drifting out there for, God, I don't even know how long. The ship was attacked by pirates. My family, his voice broke. My family didn't make it to the escape pods in time. Dr. N consulted his scanner. According to the stasis pod's logs, you've been in suspended animation for approximately 18 months, standard galactic time. The information seemed to hit like a physical blow. He buried his face in his hands, another distinctly human gesture that somehow conveyed profound grief better than any words could have. 18 months, he whispered. They're really gone, my wife, my daughter, they're really gone. H felt her protective instincts surge again. This wasn't the dangerous, unpredictable human from the Council's warnings. This was a being in pain, a survivor who had lost everything. She moved closer to the bed, careful to keep her movements slow and non-threatening. I am sorry for your loss, she said. You are safe now, but I need you to understand something important. Humans are believed to be extinct. As far as the Galactic Council knows, your species died out 200 years ago. Looked up at her, confusion replacing some of the grief in his eyes. Extinct? That's impossible. There are human colonies all over this sector. Earth alone has 12 billion people. The silence that followed was profound. H exchanged glances with her crew members, seeing her own shock reflected in their faces. She said carefully, Where exactly did you think you were traveling? What was your destination? New Haven Colony, replied, still looking confused. It's about 40 light-years from Earth in the 442 system. We were bringing supplies from the inner colonies when we were attacked. This is the 442 system, L said from his position by the door. But there are no colonies here, no human settlements, nothing. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. New Haven has been established for 20 years. It has over 1 million residents. Dr. N ran another scan, this time focusing on neurological patterns. Captain, he's not lying. His brain chemistry indicates he genuinely believes what he's saying. Then we have a problem, H said grimly. Either the Galactic Council has been hiding the existence of human colonies for 2 centuries, or something else is going on here. Struggled to sit up. Captain, you mentioned a Galactic Council. I've never heard of such an organization. Who are these people, and why do they think humans are extinct? The Galactic Council has governed this region of space for over 1,000 years, H explained. Representatives from 47 different species, maintaining peace and order across hundreds of star systems. Humans aren't part of it because according to official records, humans were destroyed after they violated the non-interference protocols 2 centuries ago. Non-interference protocols? Shook his head. I've never heard of any of this. Look, I'm just a supply ship engineer. I don't know anything about galactic politics. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that humans are very much alive and spread across dozens of star systems. H turned to her communications officer. N, run a deep scan of this system. Look for any signs of civilization, any trace of the colony mentioned. While they waited for the scan results, described the human colonies as he knew them. Independent settlements, mostly focused on resource extraction and agriculture. No contact with other alien species because, as far as humans knew, they were alone in the galaxy. We've been exploring and colonizing for about 50 years now, explained. Started when Earth became overcrowded. The colonial government sends out survey ships to find suitable worlds, then establishes settlements. It's been going great until recently. Recently, Dr. N prompted. His expression darkened. Pirates. They started hitting the supply routes about 2 years ago, not your typical raiders looking for cargo. These were systematic attacks, targeting entire settlements. My ship was carrying evacuees from 3 different colonies when we were attacked. Captain N called out, her voice tight with excitement. The deep scan is picking up something. There are artificial structures on the 4th planet, lots of them, and Captain, there are debris fields in orbit, recent ones. The implications hit H like a pulse blast. If was telling the truth, then somewhere in this supposedly empty system was evidence of a massive cover-up that went to the highest levels of the Galactic Council. Either that, or they were dealing with something far more sinister. Take us to the 4th planet, she ordered. You should know that by rescuing you, I may have just committed treason against the Galactic Council, if humans really are supposed to be extinct and I'm harboring a survivor. Met her gaze steadily. Then don't take me back to them. Help me find other survivors. Help me figure out what happened to my people. H studied his face, seeing determination there alongside the grief. This human had lost everything but hadn't given up hope. There was something compelling about that kind of resilience. I'll help you, she decided. But first, we need to find out exactly what we're dealing with. As changed course toward the 4th planet, none of them could have guessed that they were about to uncover a conspiracy that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The rescue of one abandoned human was about to become something much larger and far more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. The 4th planet of the 442 system hung before them like a wounded giant. What should have been a thriving world showed clear signs of recent devastation. Smoke plumes still rose from several continents, and the orbital debris field told a story of systematic destruction that made H's blood run cold. Sweet ancestors, whispered L from his navigation station. Captain, there are thousands of pieces of debris up there. Ships, stations, even what looks like orbital habitats. Whatever happened here wasn't quick. Had insisted on coming to the bridge despite Dr. N's protests about his condition. Now he stood beside H, staring at his destroyed colony with an expression of absolute devastation. New Haven, he said quietly. That was supposed to be humanity's new jewel. Clean industries, sustainable agriculture, schools for the children. His voice trailed off as their sensors picked up more details. Captain N reported, I'm detecting faint power signatures on the northern continent. Some kind of underground facilities. They're heavily shielded but definitely artificial. Survivors, H asked. Possibly. The energy patterns are consistent with emergency bunkers or shelters. Straightened, hope flickering in his eyes. The colony had extensive underground infrastructure, mining operations, geothermal plants, emergency shelters. If anyone survived the attack, that's where they'd be. H made her decision. Prepare a shuttle, we're going down there. Captain, Security Chief K interjected. With respect, we don't know what destroyed this colony. It could still be dangerous. Then we go in ready for anything, H replied. But I won't leave potential survivors to die while we debate the risks. 2 hours later, their shuttle touched down on what had once been New Haven's main spaceport. The landing pad was cracked and scorched, littered with the twisted remains of civilian spacecraft. In the distance, the ruins of a city stretched to the horizon, buildings reduced to skeletal frames, streets turned to rubble-filled canyons. Walked among the wreckage with the careful steps of someone afraid to find what they're looking for. This was downtown, he said, pointing to a particularly devastated area. Market District, residential towers, the Colonial Administration building. 2 million people lived here. Dr. N was scanning constantly, his instruments picking up trace amounts of exotic radiation. Whatever weapon did this, he said grimly, it was designed to maximize civilian casualties. This wasn't a military strike, it was extermination. They followed the power signatures toward what appeared to be a heavily reinforced entrance built into a hillside. The blast doors were sealed shut, but their scanners detected life signs behind the barriers. This is an emergency shelter, confirmed. Built to withstand everything from nuclear strikes to asteroid impacts. If anyone survived, they'd be in places like this. Security Chief K examined the entrance with a professional eye. These doors haven't been opened in months. The locking mechanisms are still active, but I can break through if necessary. Wait, said, there should be a communication array. He moved to what looked like a damaged control panel and began manipulating crude mechanical switches. To everyone's surprise, a speaker crackled to life. This is New Haven Emergency Shelter Alpha 7, came a voice in the human language. State your identification and purpose. Leaned closer to the microphone. This is Supply Ship Engineer from the vessel Prosperity. I'm requesting emergency assistance. The silence stretched long enough that they began to wonder if the communication had failed. Then, was reported killed 18 months ago when the Prosperity was attacked by raiders. Please identify yourself properly. I was in stasis, replied. My pod was found drifting in the asteroid field by a rescue ship. Please, I have aliens with me, friendly aliens who want to help. Another long pause. Then the massive doors began to grind open, revealing an airlock chamber large enough to accommodate their entire party. The shelter beyond was a marvel of human engineering. Carved directly from living rock, it stretched deep into the planet's crust. Hydroponic gardens provided fresh air and food, geothermal taps supplied unlimited power, and residential areas housed what appeared to be several thousand refugees. They were met by a woman who introduced herself as Administrator Sarah, one of New Haven's surviving government officials. She was middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much death. Mister, she said, clasping hands in what H recognized as a human greeting ritual. We thought you were dead. The Prosperity was one of the last ships to escape before the main attack. What happened here? Asked. Who did this? Administrator's expression hardened. We called them the ships unlike anything in our databases, weapons that could crack continents. They came without warning, without demands, without any attempt at communication. They just started killing. She led them deeper into the shelter, past residential areas where human children played in artificial gardens, their laughter a strange counterpoint to the destruction above. The attack lasted 3 days, continued. They targeted population centers first, then infrastructure, then anything that moved. We estimate 95% casualties across the colony. Dr. N consulted his scanner readings. Can you describe their technology? The radiation signatures we detected suggest weapons far beyond what most Galactic Council species possess. Stopped walking and stared at him. Galactic Council, what's that? You really don't know, H said, more to herself than to the humans. You have no idea there's an entire galactic civilization out here. We've been alone for 50 years, replied. No contact with other species because we never found any, just empty worlds and ruins of civilizations that died out millions of years ago. They reached what appeared to be the shelter's command center. where banks of primitive but functional computers monitored the surface and maintained contact with other underground facilities around the planet. "How many survivors?" asked. "Here, about 3,000. We're in contact with 6 other shelters across the planet, probably 15,000 people total. There might be more in areas where our communications can't reach." "And the other colonies?" His voice was almost a whisper. Shoulders sagged. "Gone, all of them. Aurora Prime, New Beijing Station. They hit them all within a 6-month period. As far as we know, New Haven was the last to fall." The implications were staggering. An entire human colonial network systematically destroyed by an unknown enemy. Hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dead. "Administrator," H said carefully, "I need to tell you something about the galaxy you live in. You're not alone out here. There are 47 different species in this region of space, all united under the Galactic Council. And according to their records, humans went extinct 200 years ago." Stared at her for a long moment. "That's impossible. Humans have only been spacefaring for 50 years. "Unless," Dr. N said slowly, "there were 2 separate human populations. One that encountered the Council 2 centuries ago, and another that developed space travel independently." "Or," Security Chief K added grimly, "someone has been lying to the Council for 200 years. They spent hours going through the humans' historical records, comparing dates and events with their own knowledge of galactic history. The picture that emerged was disturbing. The humans knew had indeed developed faster-than-light travel only 50 years earlier, spreading rapidly through nearby star systems. They had no knowledge of other alien species and no contact with the wider galaxy. But the timing was suspicious. The human expansion had begun just a few decades after the supposed extinction of the original human spacefaring civilization. Captain N called from the communications station where she had been monitoring galactic channels. "I'm picking up something you need to hear." The message was encrypted with Council codes, but N's skills were considerable. The decoded transmission sent chills through everyone who heard it. "Sector Command to Council High Command. Human colonial network in Sector has been neutralized. Recommend immediate sterilization protocols for any remaining population centers. The second emergence has been contained as ordered." "Second emergence," H repeated. "They knew. The Council knew there were humans out here and they ordered their destruction." His face had gone pale. "They aren't pirates, they're working for your Council." "But why?" demanded. "We never threatened anyone. We never even knew anyone else was out here." Dr. N had been analyzing the historical data on his portable computer. "I think I know," he said quietly. "Captain, do you remember the stories about why the original humans were destroyed? The non-interference protocols they supposedly violated? They were said to have uplifted a pre-species without Council approval," H recalled. "It was considered a crime against galactic law." "What if that's not what really happened?" Dr. N continued. "What if the humans the Council destroyed 200 years ago were trying to warn other species about something, or protect them from something?" Was studying the decoded transmission on their display. "This mentions sterilization protocols. That's not the language of law enforcement. That's the language of extermination." A new voice joined the conversation. "He's right about that." They turned to see another human approaching, an elderly man using a walking stick, but with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Professor Williams," Administrator said, "I thought you were resting." "Hard to rest when aliens are in the base discussing genocides," the old man replied with what H was learning to recognize as human humor. "I couldn't help but overhear. The name's David Williams. You study alien civilizations?" H asked. "What's left of them?" Williams confirmed. "I've been to dozens of worlds in this sector, studying the ruins of species that died out long before humans reached space. Want to know something interesting? They all died at roughly the same time, about 250 years ago." The command center fell silent except for the hum of electronics. "Not from war, not from natural disasters, not from disease," Williams continued. "They just stopped. Entire civilizations gone almost overnight. Their final transmissions all mention the same thing, ships coming from the galactic core, promising peace and prosperity under something called the Universal Council." "The Galactic Council," H said. "Different name, same result. Every species that joined this council disappeared within a generation. The only ones that survived were the ones that ran, hid, or were overlooked. Was staring at the professor. You think the council has been systematically eliminating species? I think, Williams said carefully, that the Galactic Council isn't what it appears to be. And I think humans, both the original spacefaring civilization and your colonial expansion, represent something they can't tolerate. But what? Asked. We're not particularly advanced. We don't have superweapons or unusual technologies. Dr. N had been running calculations on his scanner. Actually, he said slowly, you do have something unusual. Your population growth rate, your expansion speed, your adaptability. It's unlike anything in the Council databases. Most species take to spread across multiple star systems. Humans did it in decades. And H added, remembering the stories from the archive wars, humans have something else, something the Council fears above all else. What? You refuse to submit. Every species in the Council joined voluntarily, accepted their place in the hierarchy, followed the rules without question. But humans, both then and now, just keep expanding, keep pushing boundaries, keep refusing to be controlled. The implications were staggering. If they were right, then the Galactic Council wasn't a peaceful confederation but a control mechanism. And humans were being eliminated not for breaking laws, but for being impossible to control. We have to warn them, said suddenly. Earth, the inner colonies, they have no idea what's coming. How? Asked. Our long-range communications were destroyed in the attack. My ship has quantum entanglement communicators, H said. We can reach anywhere in the galaxy instantly, but if we send a warning to human space, the Council will know we've been in contact with survivors. Then we don't just send a warning, said, his voice growing stronger. We go there, we get to Earth and tell them what's really happening out here. That would be, H paused, considering, that would be an act of war against the Galactic Council. Met her gaze steadily. You saved my life when you could have left me to die. You brought me here when you could have turned me over to your authorities. You're already committed, Captain. The question is, are you willing to save an entire species? H looked around at her crew, seeing the same mixture of fear and determination in their faces that she felt in her own hearts. They were talking about challenging a galactic government, about risking everything they had ever known. But when she looked at the human survivors, at the children playing in their underground gardens while their world burned above them, the choice became clear. Then we go to Earth, she said, and we warn humanity that their real war is just beginning. The journey to Earth took 6 days through hyperspace, 6 days during which H questioned her decision 100 times. She had essentially declared war on the most powerful organization in the galaxy, all to save a species that might already be doomed. But every time doubt crept in, she would see working alongside her crew, adapting to alien technology with the same stubborn resourcefulness that had apparently made humans so dangerous to the Council. Captain, Dr. N reported from his temporary laboratory, I've finished analyzing the weapon's signatures. The radiation patterns match something in our historical database. What did you find? Do you remember the extinction event? 300 years ago, an entire species vanished overnight from there. H nodded grimly. Another species that supposedly destroyed itself in a civil war. The weapon residue on their planet matches what we found on New Haven. Captain, I don't think they destroyed themselves. I think they were murdered by the same people who are targeting humans. Looked up from the navigation console where he had been learning star charts. How many species has the Council claimed were extinct or destroyed themselves? 17 in the past 3 centuries, N answered after consulting the archives. All of them species that showed rapid technological advancement or population growth. All potential threats to Council control, said quietly. They dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and everyone on the bridge fell silent. Even from the outer planets, it was clear that this was a system full of life. Ships moved between the planets, space stations orbited the major worlds, and the radio chatter was constant and energetic. By the ancestors, L whispered, there are millions of them. Earth hung like a blue jewel in the darkness, surrounded by a constellation of orbital habitats and industrial platforms. The moon was covered with cities whose lights could be seen from space. Mars showed the geometric patterns of terraforming projects, while the asteroid belt buzzed with mining operations. Captain, N called out urgently, I'm detecting ships on an intercept course. Large ones. They're transmitting human identification codes, but... But what? They're using the same type of communications encryption that they used when they destroyed New Haven. Paled, they're already here. The Council got here first. On the massive vessels appeared as they dropped out of hyperspace. They were sleek, predatory things that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. Council ships, flying false human transponders. How long do we have? H asked. At their current speed, they'll reach Earth in 18 hours, L calculated. And the human defenses. Was studying the tactical displays with growing despair. We have orbital platforms, some military ships, but nothing like those Council vessels. Earth's never faced a real space battle. We won't last an hour against that kind of firepower. Then we level the playing field, H said grimly. N, open a channel to Earth's government, full spectrum broadcast so they can't ignore it. The response came within minutes. The face that appeared on their screen was that of an older human woman in what identified as a military uniform. Unknown vessel, this is Admiral of Earth Defense Command. You are in violation of Sol system space. Identify yourself immediately. Admiral, H began, my name is Captain H of the ship. I have rescued one of your people, and I bring urgent warnings about an imminent attack on your world. The Admiral's expression shifted from suspicion to shock as stepped into the camera's field of view. She whispered, but the Prosperity was destroyed months ago. Hello, grandmother, said quietly. I survived, but the colonies didn't, and now they're coming for Earth. The next few hours were controlled chaos as Earth's leadership grappled with revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The existence of the Galactic Council, the systematic extermination of human colonies, the approaching fleet, it was almost too much to process. But humans, H learned, were remarkably adaptable. Within 6 hours, Admiral had assembled a war council that included military leaders, scientists, and industrial managers from across the system. They listened to Professor Williams's evidence about extinct civilizations, studied Dr. N's weapon analyses, and planned for a battle they couldn't possibly win through conventional means. The Council ships are powerful, Admiral acknowledged during their strategy session, but they're also overconfident. They've never faced serious resistance from the species they've destroyed. We might be able to use that against them. What are you thinking? Asked. Asymmetric warfare. We can't match their firepower ship to ship, but we don't have to fight their kind of battle. Earth has resources they don't expect, not just military, but industrial, civilian, even academic resources. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Earth's leading, had been studying the Council ship designs. These vessels are optimized for overwhelming firepower against static targets, but they're not designed for the kind of distributed multi-vector engagement that our asteroid miners use for claim-jumping disputes. You want to use mining ships against a Council fleet? H asked. Not just mining ships, Admiral corrected. Everything. Cargo haulers, construction vessels, research ships, even passenger liners. We strap weapons to anything that can maneuver in space and coordinate them with our military vessels. It was an insane plan. It was also the most human thing H had ever heard. The next 12 hours saw the most remarkable mobilization she had ever witnessed. Shipyards that normally built cargo vessels were retooling to mount military-grade weapons. Mining ships were being fitted with missile pods designed by teams of engineers who hadn't slept in days. Even civilian transports were being equipped with sensor arrays and communication equipment to serve as coordination nodes. Captain, Security Chief K said privately, this is madness. They're turning their entire civilian fleet into warships. The casualties will be horrific. Perhaps, H replied, watching a team of human children help adults load supplies onto a converted research vessel. But look at them. They know they're probably going to die, and they're doing it anyway to protect their species. Join them at the observation deck, having just returned from a meeting with Earth's military planners. They want you to take and run, he told H. Get back to Council space and pretend you never found humans. And leave you to face this alone. It's not your fight. H studied his face, seeing the same stubborn determination that had kept him alive in that failing stasis pod. I think it is. If the Council is willing to commit genocide to maintain control, then they're a threat to every free species in the galaxy. Today they're targeting humans. Tomorrow it might be. The Council fleet arrived exactly on schedule, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 20 massive vessels, each one capable of destroying a planet. They moved with the calm confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Admiral waited until they were deep in the system before springing her trap. The first wave wasn't military vessels, but asteroid miners. Hundreds of small, agile ships that erupted from concealment among Earth's orbital debris. They swarmed the Council formation like angry insects, too small and numerous to target effectively, but carrying enough firepower to damage the larger ship's sensors and weapon systems. The Council fleet responded predictably, focusing their massive guns on the mining vessels. But for every miner they destroyed, 2 more appeared from different vectors. Cargo haulers equipped with experimental rail guns, construction ships wielding industrial cutting lasers, research vessels that had been turned into missile platforms. "They're magnificent," Dr. N whispered as they watched from position in high orbit. "Look at them coordinate. No central command, no rigid formations, just thousands of individuals working together." The battle raged for hours. The Council ships were more powerful individually, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to form up in convenient target formations. Every time they focused their fire on one group of human ships, another group would appear from an unexpected angle. But the human losses were mounting. H watched civilian vessels vaporize under Council fire, knowing that each explosion represented dozens of lives lost. The humans had to know they were dying in massive numbers, but they kept coming. "Captain," N called out, "the Council fleet is beginning to withdraw." It seemed impossible, but the sensor readings confirmed it. The Council ships, battered by hours of unconventional warfare, were pulling back toward the edge of the system. "They're not retreating," realized suddenly. "They're regrouping for orbital bombardment. If they can't win the space battle, they'll just destroy Earth from long range." And he was right. The Council ships were forming up at maximum weapons range, preparing to turn their planet-killing weapons on Earth itself. "Not if I can help it," H said grimly. "L, set course for the Council flagship, maximum speed." "Captain," Dr. N stared at her, "what are you planning?" "The humans showed us something today. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play by the enemy's rules." Accelerated toward the Council formation, broadcasting on all frequencies in military codes. To outside observers, it would look like a Council ship returning from a reconnaissance mission. They were within weapons range before the Council flagship realized what was happening. "Vessel, identify yourself," came the demand. "This is Captain H of the," she replied calmly. "I have a message for the Council from the human survivors." "There are no human survivors. The species has been eliminated as ordered." "You're wrong," H said, and triggered self-destruct sequence. The explosion took out the Council flagship and damaged 2 other vessels. More importantly, it disrupted their formation just as the human fleet's second wave arrived. Not the improvised civilian vessels this time, but Earth's actual military ships, which had used the earlier battle as cover to get into position. The battle that followed was still desperate, still costly in human lives, but it was no longer hopeless. The Council ships, designed to overwhelm resistance quickly, weren't prepared for a prolonged engagement against an enemy that kept adapting its tactics. When the surviving Council vessels finally retreated into hyperspace, they left behind something that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for 200 years, a species that had successfully resisted Council control. Stood on the bridge of the human command ship that had rescued Screw from their escape pods, looking out at the debris field that marked humanity's first galactic battle. "The Council will be back," he said quietly to Admiral. "This was just their advance force." "Let them come," the Admiral replied. "We've learned something important today. They can be beaten." Dr. N, still recovering from their near-death experience, was analyzing the battle data. "The humans lost over 3,000 vessels," he reported, "but they saved their world and proved that the Council isn't invincible." "More than that," said, "we've sent a message to every species in the galaxy. The Council can be resisted. Freedom is possible." In the weeks that followed, that message spread throughout Council space carried by refugees, traders, and sympathetic aliens who had grown tired of authoritarian rule. Species that had been classified as extinct began emerging from hiding. Worlds that had submitted to council control started questioning their allegiance. The human, who had started this as a man abandoned and hungry in the depths of space, found himself at the center of a galactic revolution. The alien captain who had rescued him had paid the ultimate price to give humanity a fighting chance. But H's sacrifice had been worth it. As reports came in from across the galaxy, the declaring independence, the coalition refusing council demands, the discovery of extinct species thriving in hidden colonies, it became clear that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy would never be the same. The Council's reign of terror was ending, and it had all started with one simple act of compassion, rescuing an abandoned human who refused to give up hope. Stood in the memorial garden that Earth had built for the alien crew members who had died to save humanity, reading the inscription on H's monument. She taught us that sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is simply refusing to let someone die alone. Around him, human and alien children played together while their parents worked side by side, planning humanity's next expansion into the stars. But this time, they wouldn't be going alone. They would be carrying with them allies from across the galaxy, species that had learned from humanity's example that freedom was worth fighting for. The Council still controlled much of galactic space, but its days were numbered. The revolution that started when a captain chose compassion over orders was spreading, and no authoritarian regime had ever survived the determined resistance of those who refused to be controlled. In saving one human, H had ultimately saved them all.